Zaha Hadid, the Iraqi-born architect who established her practice in London, died suddenly this week at the age of just 65. Dame Zaha was a larger-than-life, flamboyant figure, and her buildings often proved controversial, but she's become known the world over for her unique and highly original style. The FT's architecture writer Edwin Heathcote knew her well and is here to discuss her remarkable career. Eddie, can you tell us something about why these buildings look so distinctive?
I think the most spectacular thing about them, and the thing that was so original about her architecture, was the way she didn't distinguish between building and landscape. So most architects see a building as something placed on a ground. She always envisaged the building as something growing from the ground, as kind of an extension of the topography of the site. And that meant you got this extraordinary fluid experience of space, which really was completely unique. She's always been bigger elsewhere than she has at home, actually. All her major buildings have been somewhere else, not in Britain.
Well, that's partly the story about Britain and modern architecture, but yes, her very first completed building here was just a little, very small, single-storey Maggie's Centre, cancer care centre in Fife in Scotland, wasn't it?
That's right.
But then, of course, she went on to the fantastic aquatic centre in the Olympic Park, which everybody will remember her for.
First of the Serpentine Pavilions is forgotten now, but she did the first Serpentine Pavilion, which was originally intended to go up for one night. And Chris Smith, the then Culture Secretary, liked it so much he gave it a pass to stay in the park for 3 months for the whole of the summer. So she kicked off that programme, and she was a very loyal friend to the Serpentine all the time. And the reason I bring that up is that she always had this reputation as a kind of extremely extravagant architect whose buildings cost far more than they were supposed to. But actually, with the Serpentine tent, that was an incredibly cheap structure that she did something really quite stunning with. It was the most extraordinary roof that she made there, like a little expressionistic crystal. A lovely thing.
Tell us something about what she was actually like as a person, because you do hear stories of her spectacular rudeness, being very difficult with people, being very imperious, the total diva, in fact.
Yeah.
But you really were fond of her, I think, weren't you?
I was very fond of her, and of course all those stories are true, partly or wholly. She was absolutely a diva, and she hated being called a diva. She would say, well, if I was a man, people wouldn't use that word, and that's true. But probably if she was a man, she wouldn't have got away with some of the behaviour she did. She was difficult, awkward, prickly, but actually it was all a kind of facade, which she had to put on to be forceful enough to get her work built. I mean, you can imagine a woman on a building site in the 80s or the 90s. So in a way, she kind of developed this crust, which got more solid and thicker as her career grew on, and she became a kind of caricature of herself in a way. So she was quite aware of her image as a diva, and she used it, to great effect. But actually, she was warm, witty, really very funny. She was very fond of gossip about the architecture world and the art world and her clients, and she was actually terrific company.
Well, what do you say about women and having the authority to command what you need to command to get, incredible structures built? That is a real question about architecture as a profession, isn't it? There still are remarkably few women in architecture, or at least remarkably few whose names we know.
Yeah.
Do you think it's changing, and do you think she has helped to change it?
Yes, to both of those. I mean, there always have been, or at least through the 20th century, there have been these strong women who have been absolutely groundbreaking. You think of Eileen Gray or Lina Bird-Bardi. There are a number of these extremely original figures. They've often been slightly sidelined in the mainstream histories, but Zaha will be impossible to sideline. I mean, there is always the inevitable intro to any news piece on Zaha that she's the world's most successful female architect, or that she was the greatest woman architect. Well, it's a silly kind of qualifier, because she is one of the greatest architects of the modern era. There's man or woman. There are only maybe 3 or 4 in that category who could command that kind of adulation or awe, and who could display that kind of originality.
Well, the originality, in fact, might be a problem, mightn't it? I mean, a problem for her legacy, because I mean, nobody wants a rash of sort of second-rate Hadid knockoffs, do they? So
Yeah.
what do you think will happen now?
Well, I think interestingly, she was in a way accused occasionally of plagiarising her own oeuvre. So I think some of her buildings are more spectacular than they are usable. Some of them suffered from being experimental. You have panels falling off the Guangzhou Opera. The Olympic, the aquatic centre. If you sat in the high seats, you couldn't see the diving boards. I mean, there were these little niggles with her buildings, but that's because they were, as you say, so original, so inventive, and there were always little things that could have been tweaked. What happens now is an absolutely fascinating question. She was in a unique position because she had a partner, Patrick Schumacher, who was always the kind of intellectual underpinning of her practice, and he certainly would be capable of taking the practice on. It's a question of whether they will be able to get the same clients without the kind of star figure which she very much was. But if the practice wanted to carry on, if the employees and the management wanted to carry on, there's no reason they couldn't. They have a huge amount of work on the drawing board.
Well, we'll have to see what happens to that work. Well, thanks so much for sharing your memories of her. You've really brought her to life. An amazing woman, an amazing figure, and she will be greatly missed.